Today on the We Invested podcast, we have Jerry Fetta, the founder and CEO of Wealth Dynamics. Jerry, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great, Wesley. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining. And before we get started, would you mind letting the people know where they can find you on social media and the internet?
Yeah, for sure. So if you Google Jerry Fetta, you'll pretty much find me everywhere. I'm the most active on Instagram. So my handle is at Jerry Fetta. You can get me there. You can also go to my website, wealthdynamics.com as well, and you can get a bunch of free content and follow me there as well.
That's dope, man. That's dope. So let's just take it a little bit from the top, man, and talk about, where'd you grow up and where you from?
So I was born in Helena, Montana. I lived there till I was about 5. And then I actually moved from there to Alaska. So I lived in Alaska for about 20 years. And then just recently, I moved down to Tampa here in Florida, and we've been down here in the warm weather for a few years. But I grew up, most of my childhood was Alaska.
Nice, man. I think you might be the first person I talked to from Alaska. So,
I
how
hear that
did,
a lot.
yeah. So how would you say that growing up in Alaska kind of impacted your outlook on life and success?
Man, it definitely was different. I like to make the joke, but it's kind of true that everything that happens down here in Alaska, we just call it America. So everything that happens down in America usually takes 3 or 4 years before it arrives in Alaska. So, in middle school, I was doing stuff that, 4 years ago was cool down in California and down in Florida. But up there, it travels slower. It has a lot more room to go and a lot more space to travel. So I think for me, my outlook on that, was kind of a small town feel. There wasn't a whole lot of, I would say, cultural involvement. Like you kind of, small town, you grew up with the people, you almost if you went in a time machine, like if you went in a time machine and went back in time a little bit, that's kind of what it was like.
For sure, for sure. So how was it for you, like making that transition from Alaska down to Florida where you are now?
It's much warmer. For us, we spent a year in LA actually. In 2020, we ended up in LA for about 12 months and then went to Florida. So we got to kind of have a little bit of a gradual increase on the temperatures. And we actually did a phenomenal road trip from Los Angeles down to Tampa. So we turned it into a food tour. We did like a month and just went to everything Google said tasted good. We stopped and had some.
Oh, that's super dope.
It was
So,
great.
out of the three places that you live, Alaska, Florida, and California, which place had the best food?
Man, I would have to say it's a toss up between California and Florida. Alaska has like okay food. You got to know the right places. I don't think I got a fair shot at LA though, because it was 2020, so everything was kind of closed. So I think, if everything's open and we're going head to head, I bet that LA probably has better food than the Florida area down here. So I might have to go back and give it a second round.
Exactly, exactly. So let's just jump into the business side a little bit more, man, and talk about the company that you created.
Yeah.
Um, you know, what is Wealth Dynamics?
So we are a financial education company, and then also we're a financial services distribution company. So we work with families, individuals on helping them gain financial education, helping them build financial solvency, and then from there helping them gain greater financial freedom, in the lives that they live.
And so I think that might be the first time I've heard that term or that phrase used before. Financial service distribution. What exactly does that mean?
So it's kind of a lot of financial companies are like this. They don't come right out and say it, but when you work with a financial advisor or a bank, they distribute different products and services and things it's gonna help their end consumer, right? And so we were very conscious in tailoring. What is it that people actually need in order to build financial freedom? And often it's not the retail stuff. It's not the mutual fund. It's not the normal thing you'd get down at the bank or with the financial advisor or the insurance guy. So we went back and we looked at what is the top 1% of wealth? What do they actually do throughout history? What are the tools that they actually use? And then we set ourselves up to be able to distribute those tools and those services to people. And distribution meaning we usually have partner companies that might work the deal and they might be the ones doing it in-house in their office. And then we connect our clients with those groups and help them kind of work alongside each other.
That's incredible. So, how did you get started in this industry?
Oh man, so I started when I was 18 years old. I was a personal trainer and a bodybuilder. I went about as far as I could go at the gym as far as income and employment advancement. So I had a buddy that actually was in the financial industry. He was kind of a mentor of mine. He's like, man, you got to check this out. I grew up poor. I didn't grow up with any financial knowledge or means. And so I had no interest in finances. But I went to the meeting anyways. I sat down, I chatted with him. I learned more about what he was doing. And I saw how much people needed help. You know, I saw the statistics and the numbers on people with debt and the income and the savings problem. And that really struck home for me because I lived that. That was my childhood. That was my young adulthood. And I could also draw a lot of parallel with that and fitness. You know, like a lot of the same disciplines and attributes go into physical fitness as would go into finances. So it kind of connected, and that's kind of when I jumped in, got licensed, got started.
Nice, nice. And how was that transition for you? Did you find it was something you enjoyed? Was it something that came natural to you, or how did that move for you go?
You know, there was two parts of it. So the money side kind of like clicked for me pretty easy, right? Getting the concepts and how things worked. The business side, I'll tell you what, Wesley, that side was brutal. That was not easy for me. So I spent a long time kind of being broke and struggling as I learned sales and marketing and kind of the skills you need to learn to run any business. But the actual traction I got early was on the actual product, services, and the financial side itself.
For sure. I mean, I think you mentioned a very important point, man. A very important topic. Like just learning the business side of any business it can be challenging, especially like if you've never really done it before. So, what steps did you take to learn more about the business side of it and to gain that business acumen?
Yeah, so I delivered pizza for the longest time. I did that part-time as I tried to build my business up. So I did a lot of audiobooks. I did a lot of podcasts. And so I would probably spend, 30, 40 hours a week straight every week for probably 2 years just listening to everything I could get my hands on, whether that was, entrepreneurship, sales, guys like Zig Ziglar, Dave Ramsey, Tony Robbins, anyone I could listen to, Grant Cardone. And so that was, about 2 years of what I would consider like college level education on sales and marketing with the amount of content I consumed. And that really kind of helped. And then, once I started to get more knowledge, but also the application of it, I would learn something and then I would go try it out. And then I learned something else and I go try it out. And that balance, really helped me skill up.
Awesome, awesome. So, and this is something I find interesting. What would you say are like one of the most important topics that you pull from, the training in the content consumption that you've done for the past 2 years, or that you did for that 2 year period, like as far as sales and marketing? Is there anything that kind of really stuck out to you that stuck with you?
Yeah, one thing that hit me hard, as I started kind of learning about it, is I saw any business is about people. And so if I don't understand people and I don't understand their wants and needs, and I don't know how to communicate them with them, or even if I don't have the courage to have a conversation with them and ask questions and sell and market, it's going to be very tough. Right. And so
Yeah.
that's a different element of like us being buddies and having a beer or just hanging out. Like there's purpose behind that conversation, and I've got to know how to draw it along in the right direction as I go. So that was a big one for me.
Exactly. Now that's a great point. And another interesting topic that you speak on is, how to build wealth like the top 1%. So, what would you say is I guess a guide or a step by step to achieve, true financial freedom like the top 1%?
Yeah. So I wrote a book in 2020. It's called Blueprint to Financial Freedom. Actually, I have a copy of it here. You guys can see what it looks like. This is something I put together based on what I learned. So I was a mainstream financial advisor for a number of years. And that was, with stocks and bonds and mutual funds and the 401k plans and the life insurance and all the normal stuff. Right. And so I did that for a long time. And after I started learning, like, there's other things out there. I would meet with some of these wealthy people and they had no interest in what I was doing. They didn't want mutual funds. They didn't want to learn about the latest and greatest annuity product. And so when I started to ask more questions, it was like, it always came back to a couple of the same big things. So a big one was real estate, and not even in the traditional sense. The best real estate investor I know, he owns no real estate. He's actually a lender. And so he's like a bank. He loans out. He's the mortgage on many, 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 many properties. So that was something I saw. And so I started looking at, how do I set myself up like a bank? Because all my life I've been paying the bank. I've been paying interest and car payments and you name it. I've been giving the bank my money since I had it. So that was something I looked at. And I think for someone that wants to build financial freedom, if you ask yourself that question, how can I become the bank? You know, how do I run a system similar? I think that that gets you on the pathway to start exploring some of those right steps.
Nah, that's dope, man. And I had to write that down. That's a real like quotable. How can I become the bank? But yeah, man. So, and I feel like a lot of people kind of, when they find out about those alternatives, it kind of just turns them on to a whole new world. It's like a light bulb goes off, and they just find out about a new way to invest and a new way to diversify.
Yeah, and you know what I noticed is like when I learned it, like it was like I knew it all along, but I'd never seen the proof. Like I always knew there had to be something different. I always knew that these wealthy people that I saw, like they were doing something. It's not like they're magic, right? And I
Yeah.
just never had seen it. So when I saw proof, it was like for me that was a big validation because I was like, man, in my gut, I always knew this was out here. I always knew that these were the kind of options people were using.
Exactly, exactly. So, how can an individual make money while paying off debt and making debt an investment for their future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, to specify, this is going to be with consumer debt. So, if I've got like credit cards and student loans and car loans, that's the kind of debt we're going to talk about. So, the first thing is with investing. When I invest in anything, it requires some sort of principal amount. I've got to put in capital, right? And then there's going to be usually a payment, like a yield or an income that I get from the investment. And then it's also going to have interest. I'll earn some kind of interest, right? So, same thing with debt. When I pay off debt, that's requiring capital. So I'm putting money into it. The income I get is the payment that I used to have to make. I no longer have to make that. It comes back into my life. And then the interest that I'm earning is the interest I no longer have to pay because that debt's gone. Now, sounds great, but on paper, what ends up happening is when you pay off debt, sure, you get rid of the debt, but you also got rid of the money. And so it's like, okay, well, what if I could have invested that money long term? Could that have been more profitable? So what I do is called the sacred account. I use a special kind of life insurance. It's called high early cash value dividend paying whole life insurance. I know that's a mouthful, but it's basically HECV, high early cash value. I put money into that. So if I put $1 into it, for example, that dollar is going to grow at about a 3 to 5% annual rate. Can't lose money, can't get taxed. I can borrow against that dollar, usually about 70 to 90% of it. I'm still going to get the 3 to 5% growth while I'm borrowing it. Now I'm going to pay about 1 to 3% in interest as my cost of interest to borrow. So if I'm making 3 to 5, I'm paying 1 to 3. Chances are I'm making profit when I borrow against my money, and I'm going to use that to pay off my debt. Now, what happens is the debt's gone. I freed up the payment. I'm going to take that payment and then I'm going to pay my life insurance loan back, and I'm paying back my bank instead of theirs. And at the end of it, I'm debt free. I have no longer, the payment, the interest, all that's gone. But all that money that I borrowed to pay the debt off, it's still been there growing this whole time. So when I pay it back, I've actually got more than I started with. Plus, I have no debt. So I end up getting both things.
So how can the average person um purchase or fund the life insurance policy that you were mentioning, talking about?
Yeah. So with life insurance, you've got to go through an agent. The insurance companies are not direct to consumers. They always go through an agent, similar with like real estate. Um, so you have to be really careful that you get the right kind. Again, it's high early cash value, dividend paying whole life insurance. There's a million types of life insurance out there. This is the only kind, the certain design, certain companies. And so you have to make sure it's put together correctly. So that's the first thing. And then when you put it together, like you're going through an insurance process. So you're just anyone can do it. It's going to be underwriting and medical questions and financial questions. Usually you can start with as little as like $250 a month, and you can go as high as, we've got clients that put in, multiple six figures a year. So it's great because it's something that's been around since, the 1800s. The number one owner, actually, and I mentioned the banks, the number one owner of this type of life insurance is banks. So they own over $200 billion. They have $200 billion collectively of their own cash inside of these policies. So it's time tested. It's something that the top 1% have used forever, but it's something that literally anybody can get access to. There's a very low barrier to entry.
Yeah, man, it's something that the top 1% uses to pay large tax bills or even fund businesses. So I think it's a great way to like provide capital and liquidity just for like an everyday person who has a goal and a dream, or even who has a family and just wants to make sure that they're taken care of, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the biggest thing because it is life insurance, right? Like
Yeah.
I grew up in a family, like, do you ever play board games when you were little?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in the family where the way you win is you cheat. And so, if I'm trying to build financial independence, the way that I secure that is I cheat. And that death benefit does that for me. If I don't make it, if I don't win the game, my family is going to be financially free regardless. And so for me, that's kind of like cheating and winning the game, even though I didn't.
Exactly. Exactly. So, you believe that passive income should be greater than savings plus expenses plus your taxes. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit more and what exactly that means?
Yeah, totally. So that's the definition of financial independence, right? Part of what we're looking at is, okay, well, when I grow, when I'm born, right, there's certain like things I'm born into, whether I agree to them or not, like having to eat, gravity, economics is one of those things. And so, little baby Jerry, little did he know, like someday he was going to have to get a job and start trading his time for money and do all these things. So the goal is to get out of that. I don't want to trade my time for money. Money is not worth anything. It goes down in value every year. My time is finite, never going to get it back, and it's what life is made of. Right? So I'm trying to break out of that system, and by doing that, passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes, I no longer have the obligation of trading time for money anymore. And so then I really have freedom. Now, the key is the income has to be passive and it also has to be safe, right? So it's got to be something I can rely upon. I know it's going to show up. My rule is that I never trade time for the same money twice. So I'm not gonna work to earn a dollar and then put that dollar into an investment that requires me to work to make that investment go. I already traded my time. I'm done. Right. So it's really got to be passive as well.
No, and I think that's a great way to put it, like not gonna work for the same dollar twice. I think that's a great way to look at it. But you know, what would you say are some of your favorite opportunities of alternative investment, of alternative investing, and what do you say people need to know about this?
Yeah. So my favorite one personally is secured private lending on residential real estate. And again, if we go back to the banks, it's what they've been doing for thousands of years, right? That's what a mortgage is. So when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at how can I loan money on a property and be the mortgage where somebody's going to pay me, and that way I also don't have to be a landlord. It goes back to the passive thing. I don't want to fix the toilet. I don't want to be called at 3 a.m. to repair things and whatever else happens as a rental and a tenant, right? So that's my favorite one. The thing that most people need to know about this is it's a pretty high barrier to entry, right? So you've got to have, 5 figures at least in order to get into these kind of deals. A lot of times the minimum is maybe around $40,000, $50,000. So, if it might take some time to build it up to get that first one going. But once you're in, that thing's paying you passive income every month, and it's going to do that for the length of that mortgage. And then it's just how many of those can I stack up, right? So you might do that through a fund. There are funds you can invest in that are alternative and private funds where you put money in, they'll find the deals and put the deals together and then pay you your interest. And then you can also kind of piece it together and do it yourself. If you're able to find the properties, find the families that are going to live in them and put the mortgage together, that's another way to go about it.
For sure. And so, when you first found out about, becoming a private lender, man, what was that moment like for you? And especially when you were able to get your first like passive income, how was that for you?
Yeah, when I first heard about it, so it kind of blew my mind. I like I said, I grew up like lower income, and so that wasn't like I never thought about that. Like that was not something that was real to me when I thought of like, we had a house, we made mortgage payments. I didn't think of that as someone else's investment. Like even though it was like it didn't click for me, like all of the income we pay goes in someone's pocket and all the interest that they're charging that goes in their pocket too. And what if I could be them? Like so that was like for me it blew my mind when I was like, okay, this is actually a real thing. The guy that taught this to me, he was my best friend's dad since I was in 7th grade. Never saw the guy do a lick of work. Like he was never working. And like I knew from my dad, like if he wasn't working, he was unemployed and things weren't going so well, right? This wasn't the case. They always were going on trips. I could tell they had money. And so when I sat down with them and I was like, hey, like finally I was like, what is it that you do? And he's like, I do this private lending. And we grew up in a small town. So when he started pointing out to me all of the homes and buildings he was the lender on, like to me that was just real. I went to that place, I've been in that office, I know those people, they go to my church and he's their mortgage. So that was definitely mind opening. The first time I ever did it, like I was blown away at the simplicity, because I have a lot of friends that have done like rental properties and fourplexes, and like it's always a lot of work, like finding the property and doing the mortgage and closing and then managing the tenants. And like from afar, I was always like, man, these people are busy. When I did my first lending deal, like I signed the paperwork, I did the escrow, wired the funds over, and that was it. And then the next month, my check showed up. And then every month after that, it kept showing up. And that was, I think, like, when you appreciate something, but when you finally do it, that level of appreciation, it goes even higher. And I think that's the first moment where I could say I really appreciated passive income, because like, man, this is the first money I've ever made that didn't cost me my time.
That's awesome, man. That's incredible. And I know it does, like, especially when you grow up not really hearing too much about financial freedom and passive income. It's like when you first discover it, it's like, man, where has this been all my life? I didn't even know this existed. This was a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up not even hearing about active income. Like sometimes we didn't have regular paychecks, let alone passive
Exactly.
ones.
Exactly, man. Exactly. So, you're the author of two books, man, and you held up one of them and showed it to me. So I guess I have two questions about that. What's the vision behind the books that you've authored, and then where can the people go to purchase these books?
Yeah. So my first book that I ever wrote, it's a little booklet. It's called How to Create Wealth. And it's about 60 pages. And I put it together because, the average American reads less than one book per year. And so I was like, man, I need to put something together that's going to get right to the point. It's going to give people actionable steps, and it's going to be short so that they can get through it and then use it. For me, I went through high school. I didn't touch a book probably from seventh grade to about 19, right? Because it was always stuff I didn't care about. They wanted me to read, high school Gilgamesh and Edgar Allan Poe and all this weird stuff I had no interest in. Money, for sure, I had interest in. I would have done way better in math if they just put dollar signs in front of all the numbers. So, I wrote this little book, How to Create Wealth. And I was like, man, this has got to be, you can get it. You can get through it quickly, easy. There's not a bunch of complicated language. Like, it's got to be something I could have understood when I first started. And so that's what I put together. And we give this one away for free. So if you go to jerryfetta.com, you can get it free. You cover shipping, which I think is like $7 or $8. We send the book out to you. And then my team will actually coach you through it. We'll call you and follow up and make sure that you did get through the book. The other one that I wrote, Wesley, this is the first one I held up, Blueprints of Financial Freedom. I wrote this in the 2020 pandemic. And the thing that I was looking at here was, after this is done, the pandemic is done, like, people are going to be in a bad spot financially, and they're going to need direction. And so, with finances, it's not just about knowing the right thing, but it's about knowing the right information. It's about doing it the right way, doing it in the right order, and then doing it at the right time and with the right people. And so that's what I did with this. Is I literally put together, you start here and you just go step by step by step by step by step. It's going to give you all the tools you need and connect you with everything. And I wrote this where someone could literally read this cover to cover and just go implement it. And as long as they do it, they're going to be on their way towards that financial independence we talked about.
That's amazing, man. And while you were talking, one thing you mentioned that I feel is very important, but I want to see your thoughts on it. Is you mentioned your team, that a team will call and kind of walk you through the steps and kind of help you work your way through the book. But I wanted to ask you, what is the importance of having a team, and how did you focus on building your team?
Oh man, a team is everything, right? A team, like especially, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an investor, you're only going to get so far by yourself, right? And so, for my company, I've spent a lot of time, learning, and everything is easy till you get people involved. So you need a team, but also once you bring the team in, everyone's got their personalities and they've got their issues and different things going on. So, a team is super important. There's that old African proverb, alone you may go faster, but together you'll go farther. And I firmly believe that. So even the wealthy, like when they invest, they have this thing called a family office, and that's their team. They've got their lawyers, their CPAs, their brokers. Everyone is on that team working and pushing in the same direction. So it's important, and it's also something that you want to consistently work on, right? Like, for me, I would rather have a small team of the right people than a giant team of a bunch of people that might not be on the same page. So take the time, build it the right way, really get to know everyone, get the loyalty, get the trust, get the purpose, and then everything pushes from there.
What are some roadblocks or lessons that you've learned throughout your entrepreneurship journey?
There's a bunch of them. First one I thought of is never buy a one-way ticket if you don't have money to go home. Um, so
Okay.
so I used to commute from Alaska to Minnesota every 2 weeks. Back in the day, I was working with Dave Ramsey with investing, and so one of these trips I went on, I basically I saved up my money for my ticket, and right before we left, we had a VW Passat. The thing broke down. So I had like 2,500 bucks saved. There was going to be my plane ticket there and back, and then my hotel room and my rental car. Well, the repair costed $2,500. So I had no money, and I was still like 19, 20 years old. So all I had was, trying to get a credit card, and I'm going to get like $1,000 tops, 1,500 bucks tops on my first credit card. So that's what I did. And I bought a one-way ticket, and I was like, all right, cool. So now I'm going to just close some sales really quick, get some money, and go back home. Well, long story short, that didn't really happen that smoothly. So I'm in February in Minnesota, which is freezing. It's actually colder than Alaska in February. My hotel room has got one more night left on it. My rental car already expired. So I've got budget rental car calling me saying they're going to call the cops if I don't bring the car back. And I don't have a plane ticket home tomorrow. And so I've closed no sales either. So, I think, two things I learned from that is I ended up closing the sale. And I think that made me tougher. But I also learned, like, plan ahead, plan ahead, have reserves, have cushion. You never know what's going to happen as an entrepreneur.
For sure. So, how do you define success as an entrepreneur?
As an entrepreneur, I think success is always continuing to create, right? Like always going to the next level. What's the next best thing I can do? And not even because I've got a chip on my shoulder, I'm trying to prove something. It's just I just love the joy of creating. I think that's what entrepreneurship is about, is how can I solve problems? How can I help people? And as long as I always level that up, and as long as I always make that better and better, I think that's success. And it never stops. That's the greatest thing about it, is it's always going to keep going as long as you keep doing it.
What would you say is the most important reason for your success?
I would say not quitting. It's so easy to quit. That's the easiest thing in the world, is just to not do something. I remember when I first got started, again, I was 18 when I got in the industry. So, I'm going to sit down with 65-year-olds and tell them how to retire. Like, right. That was something that was just, to me, I couldn't even fathom that someone would listen to me about money. But I remember I had a manager, and he said, hey, one thing I'll tell you about this industry and this business, as long as you can be the cockroach and just outlast everybody, never quit, never die, never leave. As long as you can do that, you're going to be successful. And he's like, at that point, it's just a matter of when, right? And then it's just how much work did you put in, and it could take you 30 years, but let me tell you what, everyone's going to quit in the next 3 to 4. So if you last 30 and they quit at 3 to 4, you're the only one left still.
How would you like for people to remember you and your company?
I think for me and my company, I think I want them to remember us as the ones that got them free. The ones that got them out of the financial slavery of having to trade time for money, and set them up for the legacy that their kids, grandkids, they don't have to do that either.
That's dope. So, what does the future of Wealth Dynamics look like to you?
It's bright. That's what I can tell you. We're always expanding. We just hired another staff member this past week. So, as we grow, I think, we'll continue going. We're almost in all 50 states now. We're cloud-based, but we've got clients in almost all 50 states. As we keep growing, I would like to, continue to expand on that, but I would like to get to the point where we have, like a very large distribution force. I want to get other entrepreneurs involved, people that want to help others with finances and use our systems. And so I would like to have people like that. I call them ambassadors. I'd like to have them in all 50 states. And I think that would be the coolest thing ever, is just, all of this financial literacy and all these tools being shared with everybody.
That's dope, man. Jerry, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, man. And you dropped some gems in this episode for sure. But before I let you go, at the end of every podcast, we like to play a rapid fire question game where I ask you 3 questions. So if you're willing to play, I'll go ahead and ask.
Let's play.
Question number 1. Where's your favorite place to travel?
My favorite place to travel. And this has to be ones I've been to, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So far, my favorite place to travel, I thought of British Columbia in Vancouver. I went there a couple of years back. Beautiful, like the mountains, the glaciers. I'm from Alaska and we have mountains, and I was like, man, their mountains are better than our mountains.
Nice. All right. Question number 2. What song represents your life the most?
What song represents my life the most? These are good questions. Let's see. There's a whole bunch of Zach Brown Band songs that I like. You know Zach Brown Band?
Yeah.
Yeah. We could say Chicken Fried.
All right. That's dope. And look, man, final question. What's an amazing thing that you did that no one was around to see?
All right. So this was when I was a bodybuilder. So I did competitive bodybuilding. One time I did squats till I blacked out. And it was kind of sketchy that no one was around to see it because it was like I could have probably died. But also when I was done, I was like, man, I literally just pushed my body that far.
Oh, that's super dope, man. Hey, Jerry, thank you for your time today, brother. I enjoy learning from you, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.